Welcome, folks. How are we all doing today? Another day, another decent move to good move for the Dodgers. Today, getting Kirby Yates in the fold. And boy, oh boy, are the Dodgers cooking. They are cooking. But you know what, folks? Doesn't matter how many moves, nice moves the Dodgers make during the offseason. What it matters is how they play during the playoffs and eventually going to the World Series if they get there. Well, New York Mets fans, I see there's a lot of hesitation. There is a lot of worry because you look across the country and you look, oh my God, Roki Sasaki, Blake Snell, Blake Trinan, Kirby Yates, Tanner Scott, Michael Conforto. I mean, the list is going on and on and on and on. And the Dodgers spent $1.5 billion in the last 2 years. But this is what I could say. What I could say is all those moves do not guarantee anything, as we saw in 2023 when we thought we had two aces, Verlander, Scherzer. Yes, they were older, but they were coming off very good seasons. What that tells you is you've seen it many times in the past. Teams that have made these big moves, and the Dodgers, they have made ginormous moves. And not only are they like moves that revolve around like these players, these are like seventh, eighth additional moves, like, oh, we'll get a fifth superstar, a sixth superstar, a seventh superstar. So they do have a heck of a good core there in LA. But like I said, you gotta play the games. And even if you're a New York Mets fan, who cares if the Dodgers go 120-42? Who the hell cares if they have the best record in Major League Baseball? The only thing that matters, and this is what's very important, and this is why I'm not extremely worried as we stand, and what is it, January 21st? Realistically, I'm not worried now. You know when I'll be worried? I'll be worried when we are in the playoffs and we are facing the Dodgers and they are so much heads and shoulders better than us. That is when I worried, because that is the only time it matters that they are significantly better than us. We have from now up until the playoffs to solidify our team, to get whoever is on board, to get them to an approved level like we did with Sean Manaea, Severino. If we get the best out of what we have, plus we have up until the trade deadline to add pieces from other organizations. We still have the good free agents still available. I'm not sure if we're going to add them. It looks like we're looking at options like Profar and, Alonso. He could be still in the fold. We're going to talk about that soon. But what I'm trying to say is we're not playing the Dodgers tomorrow for the World Series. We're certainly not, right? So the Dodgers can do everything right now, and it doesn't matter until we play them in the playoffs. I mean, that's assuming that the Mets have a good enough record to make the playoffs. But if they don't, it wouldn't really matter how good the Dodgers are anyway, because we're not even good enough to compete. So this is assuming the Mets are good, the Dodgers are good. And, us Mets fans, by worrying about the Dodgers, that automatically eliminates the surrounding competition. So if you're evaluating David Stearns and you're knocking David Stearns for saying, hey, David Stearns, we're not good enough, you're basically saying the only team we have to worry about is the Dodgers, and we're not good enough compared to them, which, if that's the case, I'd say David Stearns, we did a good job, because you look at where David Stearns took this team in 2023, and I could say 5, 6, 7 teams in the National League were better than us. Atlanta Braves, Philadelphia Phillies, the Dodgers, the Padres. People were talking about the Cubs, the Cardinals possibly. There were about 6, 7, 8 teams. And now David Stearns, in just 1 year, our primary competition is the Dodgers. So again, how has David Stearns done in this last year and a couple of months as being president? In the eyes of some, not good enough. But in the eyes of the realistic, the rational, I would have to say David Stearns has done a pretty good job shedding a lot of excess salary and replacing that salary with short-term contracts with little risk. The only long-term contract we obviously added was the superstar generational player in Juan Soto himself. And honestly, if you're going to have an attempt at competing with the Dodgers, you need a guy to build around like Juan Soto. You certainly do. You certainly do. Now, could you bring up players and through your system and that talent, cultivate that talent and cultivate those superstars? You can do it that way, but we don't have time for that. We do not have time for that. Steve Cohen knows the fans want to win now. Now you're telling me, hey, you know what? We're not doing enough, but signing a guy like Juan Soto, what does that do? Speeds up the process. Sean Manaea, he's 33 years old. He was almost an ace-like figure last year. We know he can pitch in New York, giving him that 3-year, $75 million. What does that do? Obviously keeps our pitching talent. We're not getting any worse from last year. So we were keeping that pitching talent still at a pretty high level. And remember, the last 2 months, our pitching staff was top 5 in many pitching categories and even higher in ERA. I think we were top 3 the last 2 months. Guys like Quintana, they were pitching heads and shoulders above where they should be. David Peterson, Sean Manaea, Severino, those guys pitch their arms off. And you saw what the pitching lab did and what the philosophy of David Stearns was able to do with the talent that we had. Now, everybody, a lot of people, and I don't want to speak for you, but from what I hear, I'm speaking to the angry component right now. There is no reason to be angry. There is no reason to be angry. We're a little over the other side of the midpoint of January. And again, like I said, there's still much time between now and the beginning of the season. But that doesn't even matter because what I always say is David Stearns is a fantasy baseball GM. He will continually, throughout the course of the season and up until the playoffs when he works the waiver wire, he will continually look at opportunities to be opportunistic and to make this team better. And is he going to go the Dodgers way? Is he going to out-Dodgers the Dodgers? No. The Dodgers spent $1.5 billion. You can't out-Dodgers the Dodgers unless you're going to spend almost $2 billion. But as we know, folks, that is unrealistic. That comes with a lot of risk, a lot of drawbacks, and I don't think even the people who are skeptical about David Stearns are saying, hey, go out and spend $2 billion. You hear some of those folks saying, hey, give Pete $150 million, but, those contracts pile up. Yes, Pete is a homegrown Met, but the Mets did a lot of good things to Pete Alonso throughout this process. The Mets have been ultra respective and still ultra respective. Folks, the Mets have still, past the midpoint in January, have still not filled the first base void. They are still possibly in the mix for Alonso, depending on who you speak to. And some of the Mets insiders are really hopeful that and high on Steve Cohen and David Stearns bringing home Pete Alonso. Has this process been bizarre? Has this process been bizarre? Hell yeah. All right, folks, if you're still listening now, please, do me a favor, hit that like button. I keep forgetting to say that, but do me a favor. Always hit the like button. It helps out the channels tremendously. It's actually the second video I did. I'm having trouble with this site that I paid for. Damn, waste of money. If you're new and you haven't subscribed, or if this is a channel that you frequent, please subscribe so that we make more videos. You come back, the channel grows. We both benefit. I do appreciate that in advance. And help spread the word. Share this channel, friends, family. It really does help, and I really, really do appreciate that. I really do. Okay, so let's get some of the show's topics. Let's start talking. Boras lashing out, and Mr. Scotty himself is pretty frustrated, having two of the best free agents still left on the market, Alex Bregman, Pete Alonso. Okay, honestly, this is becoming a trend with Boras, with good free agents lasting up until spring training. Last year, Bellinger, Montgomery, Blake Snell, Matt Chapman. This is not what most typical free agents want. They want their money. They want their security. This is the time where they like to be moving their families to wherever they decide to sign. preparing for spring training. This is not ideal. I'm pretty sure right now Pete Alonso is not happy. I'm pretty sure in the back of his head, his conversations with him and Boras had Pete Alonso making at least $100 million more than what he's being offered. And the last offer you heard from the Mets at being 3 years, $68 million with opt-outs. You got to figure Pete turned down 7 years, 156, 158 in that range. So I'm pretty sure Boras throughout the process said, yeah, we'll get you 7 years, 180, 7 years, 200. But those internal conversations, we'll never know. We'll never know. But Boras, interesting enough, was asked, what is going on? I mean, you have Pete on the market, Bregman on the market, and basically Boras said it is the fault of Major League Baseball teams. They are not willing to spend, and it is their fault that his guys who deserve contracts are still unsigned. And I got to say, that is honestly, that screams of desperation, and it's displacing blame. The blame should be, really he mismanaged everything. He evaluated Pete Alonso's market incorrectly, set a ridiculous price in the beginning of the market, and that allowed all the potential teams that had first base needs to bow out. We can't afford to give Pete 7 years, 180 million. No, we're going to go out elsewhere. And, now Pete Alonso's potential suitors went from here to here. And that is because of Mr. Scott Boras. I always said, you start low, you get a couple bidders involved, 3, 4, 5 bidders, just like in the Soto and the Ohtani sweepstakes. It started at 500 million, then went to 6, then went to 7. With Pete Alonso, of course, it wouldn't have went that high, but you start at 5 years, 140, and maybe you get to 7 years, close to 200, with multiple teams who really want him. But eliminating all those potential teams in the beginning squashed everything. So basically, if you are a New York Mets fan, you got to really thank Mr. Scott Boras for scaring everybody away. And the most recent suitor, the Toronto Blue Jays, they were sniffing around the polar bear, and they were interested. They were genuinely interested. MLB insiders, still some Toronto Blue Jays insiders are still saying that Pete Alonso is a viable option for the Blue Jays. I never bought it. I mean, I had people commenting that, yeah, Blue Jays, Vladimir Guerrero at third, Pete Alonso at first. Never really made sense long term to me. It only made sense if the Toronto Blue Jays were planned to give up on Vladdy. That was the only thing that made sense. Because the thought process of putting Vladdy at third is not ideal. It's not ideal. And then, supposedly that's so he increases his value. Why? So that he gets more money from another team and leaves the Blue Jays. It doesn't make sense. If they're going to keep Vladdy, you keep him at first, try to sign him at first. And then Santander, yesterday, that made all the sense in the world. And that Santander contract, 5 years, $92 million, making $18 million a year. And now this is that basically, and I know this is a day old news, but that kills the Alonso market even further. All these moves are killing Alonso's market. And again, all these players that are being signed right now are satisfying team needs. The Jays were looking for an additional power bat to help that lineup plug behind Guerrero. So now Pete Alonso, he is not as viable, not as needed. So does he get more money than the 18 million? Well, Santander hit 44 home runs. How much more money would Pete Alonso get if that is his basic only tool? Santander's a switch hitting guy, could play outfield, play DH. Pete Alonso's, he plays a corner position. First base is not, an elite position. It's not a position that demands that high value, and he's not a switch hitter. Yes, he's got some numbers that are higher. He's got, he's been more consistent with the home runs, but as of late, he hit 34. Santander hit 44. So, just being a little more consistent, maybe the Blue Jays would value him $3 or $4 million more. But the Mets already offered him $5 million more than the 18 million. So, again, I think the Mets, they're doing their jobs. I mean, Alonso and Boras can ask for the skies, the moon, and the stars, but at the end of the day, they have not proven their worth. And everything we've said about Alonso and everything they're saying about Alonso, we said last month. I said I don't. In fact, his market. I said 6 months ago, 5 months ago, how much do I think Alonso can get a year? I said between 22 and $27 million because that is what the market calls for. I didn't get those numbers out of thin air because Olson's getting 22 million, Freddie Freeman's getting 27 million. He's probably going to be perceived between an Olson and Freeman, so he'll probably get somewhere there. And now you got a Christian Walker signing 3 years, 20 million. If you think he's a little better than Walker, so you give him a couple $1 million more. It's not rocket science. These contracts that were saying Alonso should get close to $200 million were insane. People saying that he's going to get a judge-like contract, insane. I think the most insane thing I saw last season was, oh, the latest projection is Pete Alonso's going to get 8 years and $268 million. I'm like, in what world? In what world? He doesn't play a premier position. He's not a shortstop. We saw a couple of shortstops, high-level shortstops, approaching the $300 million mark, guys who play defense and offense. But in the world of, Pete Alonso, plotting first baseman who's going to be 30 years old, and then you look at past. Okay, we look at the current contract. Then we also look at the historical portion of it. And the historical portion of it says first baseman like Pete, that profile like Pete, it's not a wise idea to give them a long-term contract because they fall off a cliff after age 31, 32. There are countless of examples. And the reason why we discovered this information is because I said for Scott Boras to show teams that Pete Alonso is such a good investment, all Scott Boras has to do is go to history and say, all these guys are great examples of why giving a long-term contract to a guy that profiles like Pete is a smart thing to do. And if you look at history in the last 30 years, even legendary players, Pujols, Cabrera, Ryan Howard, Todd Helton, Ryan Howard I already said, but the list just goes on and on about these guys falling off a cliff after 31, 32, and we have already seen regression with Pete. And every team that is remotely interested in Pete, you think that maybe there's a chance, but Pete Alonso and Scott Boras shoo these teams away. I don't want you. Which kind of, at the end of the day, if the Mets haven't filled that void and Alonso hasn't signed elsewhere, maybe they're going to end up with each other. Maybe this is, the Sasaki thing in the beginning. And I want to make a comment on Sasaki, so please stick around with that. It's going to be very significant. The Sasaki thing in the beginning of the season, it was thought that Sasaki would land with the Dodgers. Then we tried to, connect all the dots, and Padres, Mets, Cubs, Yankees, everybody tried to connect the dots to find. But the obvious thing we all kind of ignored. The most obvious answer is Pete Alonso needs to play in Queens, especially if he's going to play on that 1-year prove-it deal. Folks, it makes no sense for him to go to the Blue Jays, to go to the Mariners, to go to the Giants. No damn sense, especially if he's going to wait this thing out and miss spring training, miss time for him to get ready and get reps in. Only thing that makes sense is for him to eventually come to terms and sign with the New York Mets and have the best season possible this year so that he can go out next year and he won't have one of those draft picks attached to him, and then he could maybe sign a very lucrative deal. I mean, that's what makes sense. Right now, Boras, he's playing games, and it's funny. I was thinking about this before. And I was thinking about this before when the Mets signed Jesse Winker, and then all of a sudden, so far the Mets pivoted. They get Adrian Minter, Jesse Winker, supposedly, the insiders. a Mets insider said, "We're done. We're done with Pete Alonso." So now Pete Alonso was talking with the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays, again, I think they were very infatuated with the fact that, oh, we might get Sasaki. Oh, we might sign Santander. Oh, Guerrero might actually sign an extension. They were just very caught up in the situation. So Scott Boras comes into the office of the GM of the Blue Jays, goes, "You know what? Oh boy, do I have a deal for you. I got the polar bear, a 53 home run guy, home run king, home run derby king twice, 2 times over, rookie of the year. Guy's averages 40-something home runs. All this bluster and stuff, all this salesman stuff he's throwing at the GM." And the GM goes, "Scott, come on. We know that we're the only team right now interested. We're going to offer fair market value." And then Boris goes, "No, no, no, that's not going to work, because what you are getting in the polar bear is one of the elite home run hitters in the game." And then the GM goes, "Well, you know what? We're going to pivot right now to Santander. He hit more home runs than Pete, and he's willing to sign at $18 million." Oh, okay, but the polar bear, okay, he has been one of the most solid first basemen. Well, Scott, again, we already have a first baseman in Guerrero, so, we're not that desperate. And that's probably how the conversation went. It is just a bunch of bluster and smoke by Scott Boras, and when all the rational heads of the Toronto Blue Jays franchise got together, they said it's just not worth it to overpay for this man. And that is why all of Major League Baseball is essentially saying the same exact thing. Now, is the Alonso saga going to end soon? And I have to predict that it will end very soon, because the reason why, the Mets were supposedly out, and the Mets pivoted, and all this stuff kind of got jump started, is because the Mets made it known that waiting until spring training, March, is not the approach they want. They want to focus and move past this Pete Alonso thing, because, folks, it's not all about one guy. Even if you love Pete Alonso, I'm pretty sure you love other players on the Mets. You love Brandon Nimmo. You love Francisco Lindor. You love Mark Vientos. You love other guys. I'm sure you got to, because if you're a Mets fan, if you're Pete Alonso's family, okay, I understand why you're all in for Pete. I'd be the same exact way. But if you are a New York true Mets fan, we have to make sure that it's about the team. And you taking 3 or 4 months to focus on one man. In fact, the Mets have been focusing on signing Pete for the last year and a half now. And Pete has consistently said no, no, no. The MLB has said no, no, no. So it's kind of like I'll continue to say it's a bizarre situation with Pete. And the reason why I say it's a bizarre situation is because Pete Alonso and Scott Boras continue to play hardball as if they have a robust market. They have zero market. They have zero market. And the only teams that are interested at the moment, they disrespect. And they say, "No, you're not good enough." So what they continue to do is eliminate the small market. Scott Boras and Pete Alonso are really playing with fire. They're playing with fire. If the Mets are out, if the Blue Jays are out, if the Giants never come out and are interested, maybe another team goes, "All right, Pete, we'll give you 1 year's and 20 million, or 1 year's and 15 million." So that guarantee of 70 million goes down. The guarantee of, he had 160 million guaranteed, then supposedly 90 million. That's not confirmed. Then 70 million. That was a confirmed deal. And then it could go all the way guaranteed to like 15 or 20 million. God forbid he gets hurt. It could be one of the dumbest thought processes and decision making things of all time. And I really don't want that to happen to Pete. I really don't want that to happen to Pete. So the latest news that not one of the latest news that I was seeing today is, after the Toronto Blue Jays signed the Baltimore Orioles slugger Anthony Santander to that $92.5 million contract over the weekend, it appears Toronto is most likely off of the table as a destination for the polar bear. At the time, Alonso's return to New York, the New York Mets, seemed like it wasn't going to happen. Really seemed like it wasn't going to happen. But again, Jim Duquette, the former general manager who now writes for The Athletic, wondered in an interview on Tuesday, so that's today, with Mets Cable Television SNY, Duquette speculated the reason might be that the Mets have competition for Alonso in the form of a mystery team. So this is, I mean, this is insane. That team is not the Blue Jays, however, according to Duquette. So then it was asked, is it the Angels? Is it the Giants? But there was no confirmation about that. I mean, honestly, I think it's silly. I mean, it's silly. It's silly. It's silly because even if there was a mystery team, you're telling me the mystery team would have to offer him probably a significant amount. Because if this mystery team was offering 25 million a year and the Mets are offering 23, if you're Pete, I don't think it makes sense to uproot your whole family, uproot your situation for a potential yearly increase of $2 million. Because remember, folks, he's trying to have a great year, opt out for a larger contract. So $2 million, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, uproot your family, possibly have a worse year. You're not going to make more money. So the $2 million more that you make in 2025 will be, again, a dumb move. So a team would have to substantially beat the $23 million. So you're not talking about a team that's willing to get Pete. Your team that is willing to overpay significantly in year one. So I would say $30 million is the figure that is out there that Pete would do it. I'm not seeing that. I am not seeing that. That's why all eyes, all fingers are going to be pointing back at the New York Mets. Really, at the New York Mets, it really makes too much sense. I think it's all nonsense. It's really all nonsense. This speculation. I've been reading mystery teams and other teams being interested in Pete since early November. Early November. Even when I heard last week the Blue Jays, that's going to be the destination. I'm like, I'll believe it when I see it because I've heard this over and over and over. And then I know that for the Pete Alonso and Boras to truly sign the contract, that team not only has to be interested, but they have to meet the kind of insane asking price, which is over market value. And Pete is asking for things that would, really, if he's going to sign outside the New York Mets, they're going to have to really sweeten the pot. And that's why I think all roads will eventually lead back to Pete Alonso signing with the Mets. He'll make that $23 million. I could see maybe they'll sweeten it to 25. Remember, I said, my initial speculation is that Pete will make between 22 and $27 million in year one. And that is how Stearns evaluates it. And I also predicted the 3-year, $75 million contract, $25 million per year for Manaea. That was right on the money as well. So maybe what they do to get it done is instead of paying him $23 million in year one, maybe they'll spike that up to $27 million or $25 million. Maybe it could still be a same total value contract, but the fact that Pete making more money in year one, he'll look at it as like, okay, I'll make an extra $5 million in year one, and then we'll test the market next year. So that's a potential that is a potential situation. And again, will that end soon? I expect it to end soon because the Mets have already said they don't want this to drag out too far. They don't want this to drag too far. So I think it's going to end before January's out. That's my prediction. And if it does go to February, maybe the deadline would be pitchers and catchers, but there's going to be a quick deadline. I think the Mets are going to start playing very hardball with the Alonso and Scott Boras. Okay, so Key Brian Hayes, he was I guess thrown out as an option. Jurickson Profar, if you want to check out our video, our last video, I spoke about Jurickson Profar. Nice player. He's a guy who has probably his career year last year at age 31, where he had great numbers. I can't deny it. 24 home runs, over 80 RBIs, decent batting average. On base, that's what I liked. His on base was close to 400. OPS over 800. So everything good. Very versatility in the field. I like Jurickson Profar. I love that season from last year. But is he a guy that is he going to resort more to what the mean of his career, more to his career averages? His career averages would bring him to a 245, 250 career average. On base is well below 400. Probably about 15 home runs, 60 RBIs. So, that was a guy that I was interested in is if he comes along with an Alonso. But if it's going to be him as Winker as the two additional bats, I mean, I need more there. I need more there. And again, like I said in the beginning of the video, even if that was the approach right now, even if that was the approach, I would still expect the Mets to upgrade that situation at some point in the season. I guess that maybe at this time the market, there's nothing that is screaming or jumping out to them right now at the market that's saying great deal, that's going to significantly make us better. And they're not going to overpay. And here's the deal. People are saying, hey, why don't you overpay for this mediocre? Let's say mediocre, good player. Pete, he's like, what is he, a top 50, top 60, top 70 player? I mean, I could see overpaying for the top 5, top 10 player, but overpaying for guys who are like, top 100 players. I mean, then the next top 100 player, then you're going to have to overpay him. Then it's the top 100 players are a dime a dozen. Yes, they're good, but I'd rather overpay the elite players. Okay. So yeah, that's it. So and Ke'Bryan Hayes. So in my opinion on Ke'Bryan Hayes. Ke'Bryan Hayes is a very nice ball player. He plays third base for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He's going to be 28 years old. Very good elite. I would say very good elite third baseman in terms of defense, right? So he's a great defensive guy, but his offensive skills are very underwhelming. Last year in 400 at bats, 4 home runs, 25 RBIs, 233 batting average. Very, very underwhelming. If you look at his career, he's got a career 258 batting average, 313 on base, 698 OPS. So if you look at those figures, so you look at on base 313, very low, OPS 698. What David Stearns and what Steve Cohen are trying to do is build a lineup of patient hitters who work the counts, put pressure on the opposing pitcher, and Ke'Bryan Hayes simply does not do that. In fact, he is a downgrade off of some of your potential prospects. Brett Beatty would certainly hit more than 4 home runs, even having a bad season. Ronnie Mauricio, is a guy I like to see over there over a guy like Ke'Bryan Hayes. Maybe they aren't so better than him defensively, but offensively, they have a lot more potential. So what I want to give assets to the Pittsburgh Pirates, for an infield prospect, we already have a bunch of infield prospects. That wouldn't make sense to me. I'd rather save those assets for pitching or for another positional need to get a third baseman. That makes no sense. And is his defense, can it make up for such lack of production on the offensive end? No, because he's just so offensively challenging, in my opinion. I'm thinking like, Ray Atonia's at third base. I mean, he's not that bad offensively, but third base is the hot corner. That's a position where, you like offensive pop, you like, offensive potential. And, shortstop, you can see it more of a defensive guy, but not at third base, not at the hot corner. Makes little sense, in my opinion. He's locked up for the next 5 years at $7 million a year for the Pirates. So that's not a lot of money. And if the Pirates have him locked up at a very value contract, they're going to need something to make it worth their while. All right, why trade it? He's not making money. He's locked up. It just makes no sense. It really makes no sense for either side unless you give him something of value, or you look at Ke'Bryan Hayes and you say his offensive numbers have not showcased his talent. You could look at it from that standpoint. You could say, you know what, this guy is more like a 25, 20 home run plus guy. His 258 career batting average, I think he's more like a 280 career batting average. Unless there's something there that you see as a scout that just hasn't shown itself yet. His best year, I would say, is 2023, without a doubt. And yet in 500 plate appearances, 15 home runs, 61 RBIs, 271 batting average, 309 on base, not good, and 762 OPS. So, I mean, that might be his career year. And, that is, nothing. That's okay. It's okay. But then next year, he just goes right back to 4 home runs in 400 at bats. So, all right, folks, we're going to call it quits right now. If you haven't liked the video, please like the video. Again, help us share the video, help us grow the channel. If you have any comments, please drop any comments down in the chat. I thank you in advance, and I will speak to everyone very, very soon. Have a great day, folks.